Okay, now I have the privilege of kind of putting my own thoughts to this experience today. And I've been thinking a lot about it. And it has a lot to do with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, in particular, the very tippy top, self actualization. So when Maslow went around looking for folks who are self actualized, he only found that 1% of the adult population he could claim were self actualized. And so the things that he was looking for in folks who are self actualized is these folks have an accurate perception of reality, even if that reality is challenging. They have a warm acceptance of their own selves, of others, and of the natural way of things. They're critical, independent thinkers, and they're socially compassionate. And lastly, that they are task centered and that they use this goal driven task centeredness not for their own selves, but in order to help beyond themselves. And so Maslow scoured the universities and the workplaces, and he only found that 1% of the adult population were really living into their full potential. And so we can probably guess that it's not too different today, but we'd kind of like to change that. I'd like to see amongst the Sunday assembly crowd, maybe like 50%, maybe like 75. They can like keep growing. And I also want to emphasize that I don't like the stigma that self-actualization is something that's trivial. It's not very truly tied to our basic need for survival. So that's very true. It's a very different kind of need. But in order for us to have a healthy, dynamic, human society, we need people who are self-actualized. And without people living into their full potential, we're going to be weak, we're going to be destructive, we're going to be confused and frustrated. We're going to live a long, long time having all of our basic needs met, living very frustrated lives. And I wanted to share one example that made history last week as a direct result of people being self-actualized. Did you all hear that the Supreme Court ruling about same-sex marriage across the country? That was only possible because of decades of people who refused to let go of their self-actualization. That they knew who they were and how they wanted to live. They had a vision for that, and there are lots of barriers preventing their way, but they persisted. And now it's the law of the land. So I want to share a few snippets from the Supreme Court opinion by Justice Anthony Kennedy. It's gorgeous. I encourage everybody to go back home and read the whole thing. But together, I want to mark history and mark the importance and beauty of being self-actualized by reading some snippets from the opinion. Anthony Kennedy says, "Changed understandings of marriage are characteristic of a nation where new dimensions of freedom become apparent to new generations, often through perspectives that begin in pleas or protests and then are considered in the political sphere and the judicial process. Until the mid-20th century, same-sex intimacy long had been condemned as immoral by the state itself in most Western nations, a belief that often embodied in the criminal law. For this reason, among others, many persons did not deem homosexuals to have dignity in their own distinct identity. A truthful declaration by same-sex couples of what was in their hearts had to remain unspoken. Same-sex intimacy remained a crime in many states. Gays and lesbians were prohibited from most government employment, barred from military service, excluded under immigration laws, targeted by police, and burdened in their rights to associate. No union is more profound than marriage, for it embodies the highest ideals of love, devotion, sacrifice, and family. In forming a marital union, two people become something greater than they once were. As some of the petitioners in these cases demonstrate, marriage embodies a love that may endure even past death. It would misunderstand these men and women to say they disrespect the idea of marriage. Their plea is that they do respect it so deeply that they seek to find its fulfillment for themselves. Their hope is not to be condemned to live in loneliness, excluded from one of civilization's oldest institutions. They ask for equal dignity in the eyes of the law. The Constitution grants them that right. The judgment of the Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit is reversed. It is so ordered. So being self-actualized, knowing who we are, feeling our full potential, and working towards that is the only way we're going to keep making history. History is littered. let's say glittered instead of littered, because that's glitter sounds negative. With these historical moments that build and escalate on the backs of people who refuse to not be actualized, to refuse to not live into their full potential. And I look around our society today, around my peer group today, and myself today, and I can see a better vision for how life can be if we accept ourselves, our sexuality, all the different ways that we could live, our passions and desires. If we can find ways to live into that, we can be a happier, more fulfilled, more generous people. And we can still live a long, long time, but do it much, much better. So